Yeah, let's do some breathing meditation just to be in the present. So as always, Geshe Kelsang is in the space in front of you. Being inseparable from your lama or your lamas. Likewise, you're surrounded by all mother sentient beings. Caught in the ocean of cyclic existence and endless sufferings. So in the presence of the Buddha, surrounded by all beings, let's once again generate a sincere aspiration to become fully enlightened, to work towards removing all obstructions for the benefit of every single sentient being. So without letting go of the visualization and bodhicitta, let's recite the prayer. Sangye chodam soke chonam chancho padu dani yaksuchi tage chiso gibe sonaki
Chola Peche Sangye Chopa Shu Sangye Cholam Soke Chonam La Chancho Padu Dani Kyapsuchi Dage Jinso Kipe Sonam Ki Chola Peche Sangye Chopa Shu Sangye Cholam Soke Chonam La Chancho Padu Dani Kyapsuchi Dage Jinso Kipe Sonam Ki Chola Peche Sangye Chopa Shu.
You were not too late, I was too early. Yesterday I asked you, how does racism develop? Based on everything you learned so far, what do you think? How does racism come about? What is racism? And how does it develop? Any idea? Any suggestion? Yes.
The difference between you and me.
The difference between, okay, so we distinguish between me and you. Very good. So having a sense that the difference between me or us versus them is inherently different, or is inherently so. So exists inherently. Yeah. Okay.
One is more superior than the other.
There's a sense of, yes, we are superior to them. All right. Okay, so we label we on the basis of, first of all, my own sense of being more superior, and then those who belong to me, who I may identify as having similar characteristics. So they belong to we. Could be anything. Could be my nationality, could be my religion, could be the taste of my fashion taste, right? Punk, monk, funk, whatever. So anyway, so different reasons. But there's also a scientific, or in modern science, there's also a particular concept which you may find interesting. So as I said earlier, I want to bring in a few aspects or concepts of modern science that align with what we've been hearing. Of course, based on His Holiness the Dalai Lama's emphasis on bringing Buddhism and science together. One thing I also want to stress is, as people of the 21st century, having received a modern education, we all received a modern education. So, versus Tibetans, traditional Tibetans, who oftentimes their education was the monastic education. Actually the same amount of years, if you think about it. Elementary school, high school, university, if you add it up, that's how long a Geshe studies take. So it's pretty much equal in terms of the number of years, but it's of course based, in one case, it's science-based, and in the other case, it's based on Buddhism. Now, in that way, we're quite different from Tibetans, in that first we were trained in science, we believe in science. In fact, where previously we believed maybe the Taoist priest, the Christian priest, the rabbi and so forth, now it's the scientist. Any guy with a fancy PhD from Harvard, possibly Cambridge and so forth, we pretty much believe, right? Previously, it was the lamas, it was the priests, etc., who said something and we took it on. Now we take that on blind faith, let's be honest, right? We believe that pretty quickly. Okay. Anyway, so that being the case, never mind. But the point being that we're different to Tibetans in that the scientific understanding it goes deeper. Our scientific belief goes deeper than our Buddhist belief. Unless we were already trained in Buddhism since we were very little, as many Tibetans were. Anyway, so having said this, but it's interesting to see the similarities. So there is a concept that was recognized by a social psychologist. His name was Donald Campbell. He was born at the beginning of the 20th century. And there's also a Polish-born British citizen called Henry Tajfel. I don't know whether I pronounce it correctly. Anyway, so these two were social psychologists, and they came up with this concept of the out-group homogeneity bias. Out-group homogeneity bias. Which is very interesting, where you generalize. Anyone further away from you, you generalize. So we label. First of all, there's labeling. I and my group, certain similarities that we have. But then my group, I spend more time with my group. And my group, I get to see the differences between different people. Yes, we share certain beliefs, we share maybe the same nationality, but the point is I can see the differences between people because I'm more familiar with it. I have a concept of each unique kind of being, at least in terms of the people I know. However, when it comes to this out-group, outside of my group, there's a sense of homogeneity, that they are all the same. We see one aspect, let's say they're all European, or they're all, I don't know, all Christians from a different country, for instance. So that's what we see in that, what they have in common. And we have a sense that they're all the same. So racism, that view leads to racism in that if one of them behaves in a way I find unacceptable, I believe because they're all European, for instance, all Europeans must be like that, right? So there's a certain characteristic I see that they have in common. Another characteristic that I see in an individual European, for instance, and then having the sense they must be all like that. That would lead to racism, for instance, or all people with a particular, racism should really be more like in terms of their ethnicity. So Europeans have definitely a different ethnicity, but also the skin color, for instance. So here again, having a certain color. I know some people who act in a certain way who happen to have that skin color, and now I generalize. So I label on that skin color having that kind of characteristic, which of course is not true for everyone, but it's this out-group homogeneity bias, the sense that they're all the same, whereas we are diverse. Our group, are diverse. This can also be in terms of political affiliation, for instance, all Republicans, they're like this, right? And of course that's not true. There's so many differences, American and Republicans, since the elections just took place. It can be religious affiliation. It can also be age. All older people are like this, or all younger people are, irresponsible and self-absorbed, for instance, teenagers. It's of course also not true for all of them. Mm-hmm. So do we have this? Well, limited exposure, of course, to this other group. That's one reason. So we don't see the unique characteristics. We are not exposed to them, and we don't label. We don't categorize. We don't have a more diverse sense of what's actually happening. We just label, European, Christian, or whatever I label, or a certain age group, teenager, and because of my lack of interest, there's no exposure, or maybe there's no exposure just because of my social situation. Anyway, the point is we generalize. So our mind categorizes in a very limited way. And we tend to favor, of course, our own group and feel distance towards the rest. And that leads to stereotype prejudices and so forth. So this is an interesting phenomenon in the sense of, labeling first, and then only having a very simplistic view of the other group, because why not? We don't care about them, basically. I mean, that sounds really rude, but we can have, even if we're Buddhist, all sentient beings seems to be like an abstract over there, right, up in the sky. But then to sincerely, any living being you see, to have that care, well, when you make it, after you fake it, that's the goal, right? So eventually, of course, we'll grow more accustomed to this. Yeah, so this would be an example of labeling, and then believing just because I apply the same term to a particular group of people who are so diverse, I don't see the diversity. I generalize, I associate certain negative characteristics with their ethnicity or their religious affiliation, whatever it is. And so, that's where these stereotypes, this generalization comes in. So to be very careful that even though I call a group of people, I describe them by the same concept, by the same name, I should say, by the same label, doesn't mean that they're all the same and that there's great diversity, just as there is in my own group. And that also, it's interesting how people of other ethnicity, we all see them as the same. We have a hard time to actually distinguish them. Definitely it happened to me when I came first with Tibetan. Every Tibetan looked the same to me, right? Because I had no concept, I hadn't developed a concept of the individual differences. Now that wouldn't happen to me. No way. Even spending some time in Singapore, again, initially, I guess the first time, I couldn't have distinguished. I had a sense you dress in a very similar way, possibly, short trousers, not in Dharamsala. A lot of people sit in these cold rooms. So, not great sensitivity to cold, it seems. No, I'm joking. But the point is that, so now through familiarity, and what is familiarity other than generating concepts, categorizing, right? We make sense of things in this world. And this is also very interesting to introduce to you another scientific concept, or actually an experiment. Have you ever heard of the inverted vision experiment? It was actually founded in the late 19th century by an American psychologist called George Stratton. And so he came up with this groundbreaking experiment to give people a pair of glasses that put everything in the world upside down. So you still saw color, shapes, etc., but they were now upside down. Or they were reversed in the way in which you look in a mirror, for instance. So you would not, everything would be turned the other way around. There are these two glasses. And even modern psychologists are still, and neuroscientists are still experimenting with it, right? You've heard about it, yeah. So it's very interesting. Initially, you actually see the same as before, but you don't see anything. Because now everything is upside down. So we have these concepts. We react, there's not much thought. We have to investigate in grabbing this. I grab this, it's not difficult. But now you keep going, right? You can't walk initially because the road, the path is up there. Your feet are up there. And it's it's just impossible. You get nauseous. However, because it's not totally different from your concepts, there's still, lines and structures that you're familiar with. It takes about 8 days until you can actually fully function. So I once saw this in a documentary when one guy has these glasses where it's like the left hand becomes the right hand. So it's all reversed. And he's trying to bake a cake. The flour is all over. And he's baking a cake with this other guy who's already worn these goggles for a longer time. So the other guy's quite good. But this one person is it's really interesting. So it shows once again, although there are great similarity, things are appearing to us, right? But because we don't have a concept of this, we don't see it. I mean, you see enough to be able to avoid danger, etc. It's not like the person who's been blind since birth. But nonetheless, it is different from your concept. And then slowly, new pathways are created in your brain to provide on a neuroscientific, from a neuroscientific perspective, or from a Buddhist perspective, you create new concepts, which then in turn create new pathways in your brain. So it's not like the pathways are created first and then the conceptual mind arises. No, it's the other way around. Anyway, so taking this whole idea of what science explains to a different degree, first you have the appearances, of course, but the appearances are based on our brain, on our sense faculties. So Buddhists would say there's a reason you were born with this brain. So that goes back to karma, right? It's not coincidence that we have a human brain. And with that, we have only a limited sense perception when it comes to the visual perception, for instance. A hawk, an eagle perceives so much more. Apparently they're a type of shrimp, marine shrimps. They see a lot more colors than we do. A lot more colors because of a different brain. The dragonfly has almost a 36-degree perception of everything that's going on around them due to the shape of their eyes. So we're pretty limited in what we can see in comparison. Then as to hearing, a bat hears so much more. An elephant, I mean, the ears indicate. So an elephant apparently hears really well. A dolphin does as well. So as humans, we don't have the same capacity. Of course, there are other animals we're better than, or other living beings we're better than. But in this but in this case, I'm just choosing those beings who are better, or animals who are better than us. Then when it comes to smell, for instance, dogs definitely have 100,000 times better smell than us. 100,000 times. And bears have even a better smell. Not many bears in Singapore, right? Maybe in the sea. Okay. Right, so a bear has an even better sense of smell. Sharks have a very good sense of smell. They smell blood. Moth have a really good sense of smell. I guess you could say pigs because they know where the truffles are. Anyway, so that shows again it's quite limited. We have a limited sense perception. And then there is taste. We have about 10,000 taste buds. Cows have 25,000. Yeah, cows have a better sense of... Oh, the smell, I forgot the elephants. The elephant, obvious. The elephant has a very good sense of smell. No, but when it comes to taste, humans are not bad. Wide variety of different foods, which that would explain why we have so much different food as a species, right? It's not like the cow, Singaporean cow or German cow, pretty much the same diet. But we have a much larger variety of, but still we have less taste buds. So, like I said, even a cow has 25,000, for instance, taste buds. Okay, so because they have to, because the cow, it kind of makes sense. Oh, and there's a catfish, apparently. There's a fish that has 175,000 taste buds, because this particular fish lives in very murky water. And to be able to perceive the kind of taste, the kind of food that is edible, it needs to have, so it kind of basically tastes everything, a little of everything, and then only discards that which is not considered to be tasty, I suppose, and then only eats that which it needs to eat. So it's important for survival. Okay. And then lastly, you have the tangibility, like tangible experience. And there you have, for instance, octopus. Octopus has a lot of it. In every of its little kind of roundish things, it's got like a taste perception. An elephant does too. They have a very sensitive skin, and they perceive a lot more tactile sensations than we do. So it's like, we don't get all of reality. Anyway, I mean, that what is possible in this realm, in this desire realm, what is possible, we get only a fraction in comparison to certain other species. So anyway, this is all dependent on our karma. It's not that there's like really an objective variety. From a Buddhist point of view, this sounds very much Chittamatra, but it's not exactly Chittamatra. It's not all the way Chittamatra. So there are differences, because we talk about a conventional external world at the very least, and the mind doesn't have a greater, more real existence than everything else. That's not the case. That would then be Chittamatra, where the mind is this truly existent phenomenon, and then there are other phenomena that don't exist truly. That's what the Chittamatra says. No. We are talking about here the consequentialist school that say everything that appears to us, it appears to us due to our karma. Right? Again, going back to the bowl of liquid, water, and so forth. It's pretty obvious in this case. But also, why are we born with this human brain? Why are we born with the appearances that we have that are very unique? We've heard about the color. Even among us, seeing the shoe is pink or is green, there are differences. Okay. And then there is the concepts we develop. There's this categorization of the input of the different appearances. We then make sense of our world. We make sense of our world, which takes some time, as the inverted vision experiment shows us, that just as it takes for a child some time to make sense of the world around them, to categorize this is that, see similarity in things. And similarities we can see in many things, but that doesn't mean that we create a category where all of these are part of, right? I mean, many phenomena have similarities, but we may not see them as part of the same category. But if you're from the Himba tribe in Namibia, there's a Himba tribe in Namibia where they categorize colors very differently, right? Very differently. So I looked it up today. I would have never remembered the names of the colors, but just to give you the names of the colors, it's so different. So therefore, their color perception is also very, very different. Where is it? The Himba people, yeah. So, what is it? I don't have it here. Anyway, so they have different terms. So they have these categories. I don't remember the names of the colors now because I forgot to put it here. But anyway, so what happens is they have these different categories of colors, like 4 categories at least, and in many of them there's green. But in the first category that also contains green, it's dark green, dark red, black. They're all part of this category. And then in the next category, it's kind of white and yellow. And in the next category, it's again green, but also blue. And in the last category, it's a different type of green. So they have 3 totally different names for different greens. So obviously they perceive a lot of different greens. Greens we cannot notice. But for them, green and blue are kind of very similar. They don't really see the difference because they use the same term. In one category of all bluish and green kind of terms. They live in a thick jungle. Probably see the sky every now and then, but basically it's a lot of green and brown that they perceive. So just by reason of the fact that they categorize colors in such a different way, not in segments, like different types of green, like just dark green, light green, middling green, yellowish green, green, the term is always used. Not doing that, they see them as like totally different. Zulu and Bamba, and I just remember briefly Zulu was in there, I think. Anyway, so they have a very specific way of seeing colors. So different. Or some other very interesting phenomenon. Asians versus Europeans. Asians, you see, when I look at all of you, I pay more attention to the individual person. Because we're a very individualistic culture. Whereas you see much more the relationship and have more holistic view when you look at people. How are they connected? Which is interesting because what is Western medicine? Focusing on one particular disease and finding a particular cure for that. Whereas Chinese medicine is more holistic. So it's, again, the kind of concept you follow. The way, I don't know, I have no comparison because I don't know how you look at things. But possibly if I look at like all of you as part of the Sangha of TBC or of ABC or other places, I don't know. But the point is I probably have more like, I see the individual person disconnected possibly from everyone else versus you who maybe make more connections. Those belong together, those belong. I'm just guessing here. So again, a different view of reality because of a different cultural background. Isn't that fascinating? So it all shows us, these are all phenomena that neuroscientists analyze, psychologists in particular, analyze and find it has to do with our thoughts, with our concepts. Whether due to our culture, due to the language we use, both, and so forth. Okay, so all this is really supported. So that helps us to be more convinced because we are more convinced at this point by what a scientist tells us versus what Buddhism tells us. Certain things we can take on easily, but other things they may be a little harder for us to believe, especially since we believe in this objective world out there. Okay, anyway, so that was a bit longer than I wanted to. All right, let's go back to the text. If I don't finish the 4 pages today, I'll just won't do the scientific part tomorrow and then just go into the material. It's most important that we finish. All right, let's go back to the relationship between the two truths. Okay, on page 33. What I said yesterday, of course, is that they are inseparably linked, the two truths, but of course not saying the true truth in general, with the true truth referring, the ultimate truth referring to emptiness, and the conventional truth, everything else that exists. Anyway, so these two in relation to, for instance, the cup, or in relation to the table, they're of one nature. They're inseparably linked. One is a characteristic of the other. So emptiness is the characteristic of the conventional truth, this table. So Nagarjuna says suchness cannot be found separate from the conventional. So suchness is dependent on the conventional. And the conventional is, or suchness means the ultimate truth, is dependent on the conventional. And the conventional is dependent on the ultimate truth. The conventional is described as emptiness, as lacking as being empty of inherent existence. So as emptiness, not literally emptiness, but as described as lack of inherent existence. Emptiness itself is the conventional. So it's like, so here saying the conventional is described as lacking inherent existence, and that lack of inherent existence itself is of the same nature as the conventional. One does not occur without the other, like product and impermanent. So product, that's a word that is used a lot in philosophy. Product means something that is the result of causes and conditions. Something that is the result of causes and conditions is called a product. It's described as a product. So anything that is impermanent is a product. Anything that is a product is impermanent. Anything that has arisen in dependence on causes and conditions is changing all the time. Anyway, so the first 2 lines of this quote explain that the conventional truth and the ultimate truth are of one nature. The next 2 lines give 2 reasons why the true truth are of one nature. All conventional truths are empty of inherent existence. That's line number 3. The conventional is described as emptiness. Then their lack of inherent existence exists on the basis of the conventional truth. Also here, emptiness itself is the conventional, means that the lack of inherent existence of any phenomenon exists on the basis of on that phenomenon, on that conventional truth. Okay, so Yeah, so the first two lines are just making that statement. The next two lines explain why the two truths cannot be separated. The last two lines explain that the two truths are therefore related in such a way that one does not exist without the other. This means that the ultimate truth of the I does not exist if the conventional truth, the I, does not exist, and the conventional truth, an I, does not exist if the ultimate truth of the I does not exist. The example that helps to illustrate this is product and impermanent, which are also of one nature and are connected in such a way that one does not exist without the other. So if you have product, you have impermanent product. They are also of one nature. Okay. So, having said this, is not that hard, but it needs to sink in that that's how they're connected. Even though the two truths are of one nature, they are contradictory. In other words, there's nothing which is a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. Right? So nothing can be both an ultimate truth and a conventional truth, but still they're very closely linked. There's nothing that is both these truths, because there's nothing that is both deceptive. A conventional truth is deceptive, it appears in a way in which it doesn't exist, and non-deceptive. It appears in the way in which it exists, which is a truth. Remember, the ultimate truth, when it appears to a sentient being's direct perceiving mind, it always appears as lacking inherent existence. It does not appear as if existing inherently. That's true for emptiness. However, for any other phenomenon other than emptiness, the opposite is the case. It appears to exist inherently. Even though a car, for instance, lacks inherent existence, the car is not its ultimate truth. Even though a car, for instance, lacks inherent existence, but that doesn't make it an ultimate truth. Doesn't mean it is an ultimate truth. So it lacks inherent existence, but just because something lacks inherent existence is not necessarily emptiness. Does that make sense? So the lack of inherent existence of the car, that's emptiness. But the car is not emptiness, even though it lacks inherent existence. So it's a different phenomenon altogether. So the car is not its ultimate truth, just as the car is not its shape and color, its impermanence, and so forth. So someone may think, just because it lacks inherent existence, it must be emptiness, but it's not. Okay, anyway, having said all this, so this relationship between the two truths is also expressed in the following passage from the Heart Sutra. Form is empty. Sometimes it says form is emptiness, but in Tibetan, at least in the version that I'm most familiar with, it doesn't say form is emptiness. It says form is empty. Okay. So what does form refer to here? What does form refer to here? Pardon? Shape, size. But there's something more specific that it refers to. Pardon? The aggregate, the body. It refers, because later on it says that likewise there's no feeling, no discrimination. So when you think of the 5 aggregates, the first aggregate is the aggregate of form, which is our body. Basically, previously, Avalokiteshvara said that the self also doesn't exist inherently. The 5 aggregates also don't exist inherently. So previously, this sutra, the Heart Sutra, is taught as part of the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And during that turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha emphasizes the lack of inherent existence of the aggregates of phenomena other than the self. In the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha talked about the ultimate nature of the self. So now during the second turning, as for instance clear in the Heart Sutra, it says the 5 aggregates are also empty of inherent existence. So also is usually explained to mean, during the first turning of the wheel, I said that the self doesn't exist inherently. So also the five aggregates. I'm saying here now the five aggregates, they also lack inherent existence. So the form aggregate, taking that, the body as an example, it is empty. It lacks inherent existence. Then it says emptiness is form. Emptiness is the body. Huh? Now that's weird. That's weird. Then it says emptiness is no other than form. Form too is no other than emptiness. Alright, let's look at these 4 lines. Because in order to understand the Heart Sutra, when you read a commentary about the Heart Sutra, it's not that difficult. Most difficult are these 4 sentences. So these 4 lines are said to teach the 4 profundities. That's a loose translation of what it says in Tibetan, the 4 empties. But actually 4 profundities, I think, is a good translation here. It's not a literal translation, but there are 4 profound concepts or profound factors in relation to the true truth. Okay, so let's look at them. The profundity of the ultimate, that's the first one. The profundity of the conventional. The profundity of the true truth being the same nature. And the profundity of the true truth being nominally different. Okay, so we go through all of them. They're not that difficult, with you having a background already, having studied the true truth, having studied emptiness, it's not that hard. So, first of all, here, form refers to the physical body, the physical aggregates. Okay. The body is a conventional truth, while its emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of the body, is an ultimate truth. So form is empty teaches the first profundity of the ultimate because it indicates the emptiness of the inherent existence of the body, which is the body's ultimate truth. So that's pretty easy. So what's the body's ultimate truth? Its lack of inherent existence. Implied by the words, form is empty. Now it gets harder. Emptiness is form. Huh? The emptiness of the body is the body? No. Literally, that's not acceptable. It needs to be interpreted. It teaches the second profundity of the conventional. In what way? But because it indicates the fact that the body exists because it lacks inherent existence. So in other words, because of its emptiness, form is possible. Because my body doesn't exist inherently, therefore it can exist. If my body existed inherently, it wouldn't be possible. It wouldn't exist. So, if things existed inherently, nothing would be possible. Does that make sense? For us, for our misperception of reality, that is very good with contradictions. Things exist, they exist inherently. From a Buddhist point of view, that's totally contradictory. I could never talk to you if you existed inherently. I couldn't talk, and you couldn't hear me if you existed inherently. You couldn't change, first of all. But you do change. The moment I talk to you, you are now the person who hears what I just said. You're not the same person. I'm not saying you become totally different, but you change all the time. You hear what I say, I hear what you say back to me. So our interaction implies change, right? In response to what you say, I think about something, I then give a reply, you again. So we have a conversation. We communicate with each other. We affect each other, right? So however subtle that effect may be, but it takes place, doesn't it? So we change. We change all the time. Other people are responsible. They tell us things. Even we know them, but still, because of this communication, we slightly change. And that wouldn't be possible if we inherently existed, as one example. So emptiness is form, teaches the second profundity of the conventional. Why? Because it indicates the fact that the body, in this case the body, exists because it lacks inherent existence. although that is not obvious from the literal wording. So literally it says emptiness is form, right? So the literal wording doesn't imply that, but that's how it's usually explained. That's how the Buddha himself explained it. So therefore the body can be described as a manifestation of emptiness. A manifestation of emptiness. That's really weird, but it's almost like because of emptiness, everything is possible. So because of phenomena lack inherent existence, they can manifest, they can exist. So it's almost as if, you can almost say that the body can be a manifestation of emptiness, which it's not, again, literally not the case. And His Holiness says that in his commentary on the Heart Sutra, kind of like a manifestation of emptiness. So I took this phrase, I took it over. But really what it means is the body is possible because of its lack of inherent existence. Because it depends for its existence on being empty of inherent existence. Yeah. Does that make sense? It's not that hard, right? And this is supported by Nagarjuna in his text, Fundamental Wisdom, when he says, to those for whom emptiness makes sense, everything makes sense. To those for whom emptiness makes no sense, nothing makes sense. Right? I mean, really, they may think it makes sense, but it doesn't. These words are really beautiful. I think that statement is so beautiful. When emptiness makes sense, everything makes sense. If phenomena lack inherent existence, then everything is possible. To those for whom emptiness makes no sense, nothing really makes sense. I mean, they're just totally mistaken in terms of how they perceive things. It's in total contradiction to reality. So that really nicely summarizes the explanation that was given above. Also, the body and its ultimate truth are of one nature. So they're very closely linked. Since the ultimate truth of the body is a characteristic of the body. This is expressed in the line, emptiness is no other than form, which teaches the profundity of the true truth being of the same nature. Because the conventional truth, the body, is of one nature with its ultimate truth, the body's lack of inherent existence. Okay. However, even though the form aggregate and its ultimate nature, its ultimate truth, are of one nature, they are not identical, but two nominally different phenomena. So they're of one nature doesn't mean they're one. This is expressed in the line, form too is no other than emptiness, which teaches the profundity of the true truth being nominally different, although this is not obvious from the literal wording. Where does it say that? It says the same as before. Emptiness is no other than form. Form too is no other than emptiness. So people go, what? Where does it say they're nominally different? But yeah, that's how it's explained. I mean, that's implied. That's implied. So it's implied by these words, and the commentaries also explain that. Does that make sense? All right. Thus, the true truth are different phenomena, but not of different natures. They are not one phenomenon, but of one nature. They're not one, but of one nature. This is not terribly difficult. It doesn't take long to explain it, but it needs to be explained. It needs to be explained how the two connect or relate to each other. Okay, that's great. So we covered this part as part of the explanation on the true truth. Of course, it's always important to go back to how is this relevant to our daily life? How is this relevant to our daily life? It's a little difficult to draw a direct connection. Okay, the true truth of one nature, okay. But of course, it shows that I exist because I lack inherent existence. You exist because you lack inherent existence. Everything becomes possible because we lack inherent existence. And if you really understand that, or the more you understand that, the more you're affected by the stuff that happens to you. It makes you very resilient. Because, for different reasons. First of all, what we said in the very beginning. Things happen to me because of karmic actions in the past. I find that very liberating. I'm responsible. Other people, I cannot change other people. I cannot make them behave in a certain way. I can ask them to behave differently, but there's no guarantee they listen to me. So if I'm mainly responsible, because, I may be a very good person now, but, thousands and millions of years ago, why was I not a horrible person? I could have been. We've changed. I can change even in this life. I was a horrible teenager. My mom knows. She can attest to this. I love it when I hear about teenagers here. I'm thinking, oh, it's me all over again. Yeah, I know what that felt like. My hormones, No, very interesting. So I was a terrible teenager, and I was definitely in high school. I didn't like high school much. I thought, in comparison to my life now, so much better. The confusion, But I'm sure I was also a bully. I was mean to some girls who I looked down on, and then others were mean to me, and all this. So even not that long ago, I'm sure I was really mean to some people. I'm not aware of it. I probably suppressed it. I like to think of myself as a nice person, but honestly, I'm sure I did lots of horrible things, even becoming a nun. And the thing is, if I can do this in this lifetime, I may have been a serial killer 500 years ago. And looking back in history, how cruel people were one another. Let's fight a war, get the axe ready. Right? Cut off each other's head. Otherwise, your family's head is being cut off. So we did some cruel things to each other. So that stuff happens to us is not surprising. Okay, so stuff happens, but it's so liberating that I'm responsible. And I can be sure that I won't accumulate the causes again in the future. Right? If someone insults me, for instance, well, if I insult them back, I just created the same karma again. Thank you very much. For it to happen again. But then instead, I'm patient. Well, at least this kind of karma I'm not creating right now. So that's beautiful, isn't it? It's almost like it's in your hand. It's like this Amazon, order list. What do I want for the future? Instead of kind of clicking on it and put it in the cart and whatever, now you act accordingly. You're forming your own future. It's kind of like a catalog. You're ordering things. It's like the way we act, we determine our future. And it's for free. You don't have to pay for it. No delivery or anything. It comes on its own. So the point is, it's in our own hand. That's the first step. So what do we want to be experienced in the future? But then based on that, then when we think about phenomena, us labeling, we label. We make sense of the world, and there's nothing wrong with labeling. I'm not blaming labeling. There's nothing wrong with it. This is how our brain and how our mind works. This is how the mind works of animals. As humans, we're of course able to make a lot more sophisticated categories, right? We can use language in a much more extensive way. And the more concepts we have, the more we're able to recognize things. We've all had that experience. You read a book about certain emotions, you get an idea of the different emotions that they are, and suddenly you start recognizing them in yourself, because now you have a label to apply and a way to distinguish them from others. Right? So the more you label, the better your understanding of certain things, the more variety you recognize in the appearances, etc. Anyway, but we need to know that that's all there is. It's just labeled. It doesn't exist inherently as this, that, and the other. And again, that is so liberating. That's why competitiveness actually doesn't make sense. So, of course, conventionally, you and I are different, but not inherently different. Which is why, if you are doing well, I'm doing well. Especially when it comes to Dharma practice. We live in a very competitive world. That's the 21st century. It is actually, I think, the government, etc., it's in their interest that people are competitive. And there's nothing wrong with competitiveness in general. Competitiveness, I think it's more the envy that's the problem. Competitiveness is like, I want to be as good as everyone else. That's okay. But when it comes to the degree, like, I don't want them to be good, I want to be that, that's when it becomes a problem. That we call envy. So competitiveness is sometimes used in a positive way, sometimes in a negative way, but we can agree on just competitiveness there's no problem with that, because there's still no resentment. But then, when it becomes a mind that wishes for another person to not be successful, and instead us to be successful, or this other person not to have this great car, but me to have it, and so forth, then it turns into a very painful experience, number one. But secondly, besides the pain, it's not in accordance with reality because of our interdependence. If I actually rejoice in what you have, I create the causes to have the same, versus being envy and not wanting you to have it. I'm creating the cause for not having it myself. That's the irony. I feel like when I'm jealous, I get it. I'm not wanting the other person to have it. It seems to me to really get the thing, right? So it's like, I don't want them to have it. So it's like with the eating, like being angry, eating the poison and hoping the other person to die. It's a bit like, if I'm long enough resenting the other person for having it, they may lose it and I get it. Right? It's not going to happen. From the point of view of our interconnectedness and how cause and effect work, I affect the opposite. That not only do I feel miserable when I'm envious, jealous, envious, but also I'm creating the causes for not having this object. Well, with regard to not creating the causes for not having the object, the success, whatever I'm envying the other person for, that's of course one thing in terms of the future. But you see, if I rejoice instead, rejoice in what they have, I'm a much happier person. Because if I only feel happy about my own success, that's only a single person. I can only provide myself with the success of one single person. But then if I learn to be happy for all of you, for all of your successes, I'm a much happier person. I cannot have all of your successes. I can't. I'm just a single person. But I can rejoice in it and be sincerely happy. And especially with the Dharma. We come from a competitive society, which leads to envy. Not necessarily. Not everyone has a tendency for envy, and there are different levels. But having these tendencies, when we come to the Dharma, we also have the tendency to be competitive, right? Oh, they're doing much better. They're better in their study. It's a natural tendency. But actually, if the other person is really doing well in their Dharma practice, as their Sangha, as my Sangha, and as a future Buddha, I have a karmic connection with them. They help me for the Dharma to be around, and they help me to do my practice. Oh, no, it's there again. Okay. I should be so happy. I should be so happy if everyone is doing well. I should be so happy. It should be in my interest. You guys practice hard. And when you're there, don't forget about me. Take me to Buddhahood, right? And look, how terrible. If we think, may this person not be good in their Dharma practice, then I'm depriving myself of the Dharma in the future. That's terrible. So especially in the Dharma, we should be so happy for everyone doing well in their study, in their practice. So happy. Oh my God, the Sangha, they're there to support me. I have this karmic connection with them. And they're practicing bodhicitta. Yeah, more bodhicitta. All sentient beings, including this one, right? I should be totally supportive of that. So really, when you think about it, therefore, it makes so much more sense. And that it's possible, well, I've seen this with my classmates. My class were only months. Now things change a little bit, for instance, at the IVD, but when I started, there were no monks. There were no women in my class, so they were all monks. And they were all monks from Tibet. No nuns from Tibet. So nuns are similar that way, but they were all monks from Tibet. Very few exceptions from other areas of the Himalayan regions. But because they came from Tibet and they were raised in this traditional Buddhist way, many of them had gone to Drepung, for instance, had studied there for a couple of years, but they were very much influenced by the Dharma. And they really rejoiced in each other's success. Really, so that was amazing. It was natural. They weren't envious of each other. You know, they sometimes someone was really good in the exam or did really well in a debate, and they were very happy. Everyone else was very happy. And sometimes it was them, so they were happy for themselves, but then when someone else was, it was the same. It didn't really, it was our success much more than my success versus there. So much more seeing how great we're connected, we're studying together, and my classmate is doing well. It wasn't fake, it was real, and they really rejoiced, and they were much happier. Because they could only have the success of one person, but then they could be happy for everyone else. So much more happiness. Because when we're jealous or envious, we're just miserable. We're just not happy. So, but we have a personal responsibility to be happy. I don't think in Singapore you have the same problem as in some Western countries, where people feel guilty to be happy. Do you have that? Do you have the sense of guilt?
No.
Traditionally, in Jewish societies, I often go to Israel, and so in Israel, because of the Holocaust and the great suffering that Jewish people have experienced, there is a bit of a sense of guilt if you feel happy when your people are still suffering, when there's been so much suffering. But I tell them, no, if you feel miserable, you can't really help others. You can't help yourself, and helping others, I mean, if you're always depressed, no one wants to be around you. And you don't have that lightness, and you don't affect others in a positive way. So we have a personal responsibility of having some kind of sense of peace and happiness. We can help others much better. We're a good example, right? Like in terms of Dharma practice. Oh, we're happy and light. So that's a good example. I mean, I don't want to put pressure on you to all be happy. Of course, don't get me wrong, you know. But first of all, we need to understand we all have the right and we deserve to be happy. Because even though sometimes we unknowingly have created the causes not to be happy. We didn't do this on purpose. We unknowingly did so, thinking it brings us happiness, and this is true for others. But then, in terms of not feeling guilty, I want you to not feel guilty to be happy, even though you not always are, but strive towards it. It's a good thing. It's not selfish, because you can benefit other beings so much. Look at His Holiness. He's not a depressed Lama. Lama Zopa was not a depressed Lama. No, the opposite. Right? Very light, very jolly. So it affected us greatly. Yeah, His Holiness too. This light, just him hearing his laugh, we all laugh with His Holiness. Yeah? So we don't need to feel bad about it. Instead, work towards it, not just for our own benefit, but also for the benefit of others. It all makes sense. Everything I said just now is connected to everything else, and it basically all makes sense in terms of emptiness. Right? In terms of dependent arising. Everything we learn is part of the same puzzle, and it's all connected. Part of the same picture. So, therefore, our actions to rejoice, that's the point. Learn to rejoice. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche did one of the best rejoicing meditations once in Tushita. What a trick, I thought. That's such a trick. Psychologically, it was really clever. The meditation he did, it was like a huge hall. Rinpoche was teaching. And at some point, it was part of a puja, I think. And the part when the rejoicing came, I think it was during the Lama Chepa, when you rejoice, he kind of started talking and explaining and said, now let's start rejoicing. And there were a lot of Westerners behind me. As a nun, I was more sitting towards the front. And there were Westerners who just come to the Dharma, did a course, and they happened to be there when Rinpoche was there. And he did this meditation where he said, just think of someone like a Buddha and rejoice in the Buddha's action. That's pretty easy. Who's jealous of a Buddha? I mean, come on. So that's pretty easy, right? And so we think and really feel that joy and feel that joy. So first you generate this joy, and then he kind of, it's almost like a blanket. It starts growing. And then you extend it to others who you don't know, or others who you love and who you can really be happy for. So you just extend it. And he continued to ask us to extend it, just extend it. And now extend it to those you're jealous of. In that moment, it was like your joy was so great. You didn't want to bring that jealous mind up, like, why would you want to be jealous? You're so happy right now. And so therefore, you couldn't be bothered to be jealous. You just kind of included them in the whole pot of everyone who you're rejoicing. And it worked. It was beautiful. I looked around because I was thinking, how do people, how does it? And everyone was like, right? People were there because they were new, it was not like, and I looked around and I asked them, how was it? And they said, it really worked. Yeah, and usually someone just stood there and took pictures of us.
No.
It's okay? Okay, they're gone now. Someone just stood there and took pictures. Okay, anyway, so it worked. I mean, the people there, the ones I asked, and the smiles on their faces, they were pretty obvious. So what a clever psychological trick. Yeah, just shows this jealousy. It's just a habit, and we get into it, and then but you can undo this. Fake it. I mean, that was totally fake. That reminds me. That reminds me of something that modern psychologists tell us. When you're really, really stressed out, like really stressed out, and you're unhappy because you're stressed out, just smile. Because when you smile, it releases automatically chemicals in your body that calm you down. Or just tell yourself, I'm not stressed. This is a challenge. Just tell yourself. Just repeat it in your mind. Your mind doesn't know you're just faking. Your brain doesn't know you're faking. It really works. It really works. It's sometimes just, so don't think I'm just faking it. No, that's not, that thought you have to avoid. Right? That thought you have to avoid. Just believe you're not faking it. Believe it's true. It's true. I'm not stressed. This is wonderful. I'm learning. This is a challenge. I remember times when I was so stressed out having exams, like all the material to memorize. And I remember that technique, and I kept thinking, this is so great. I love it. Bring on more. Bring on more. And I enjoy it. And at some point, the stress was gone. The power of our concepts. The power of our concepts. This is the beauty. We just need to learn to use it. And you create your own reality. Cognitive appraisal, or whatever you want to call it. But this is total faking. Even the faking works. The fake, if you like, rejoicing that Lama Zopa Rinpoche did, it became real to everyone there. I think most people, at least, I didn't speak to everyone, but they looked pretty blissed out when I looked around. Secondly, when you're really stressed out, when really things go wrong, take this opportunity. Now, as your homework, if you have the opportunity, hopefully, today's Thursday. You have one more day to work. So, hopefully you'll have a terrible experience. Sorry, I'm kidding. But no, I'm kidding. But just any kind of, take any opportunity and just, instead of having the thought, oh, that sucks. Oh, life is terrible. Just think, no, this is an opportunity for me to practice patience. This holistic Dalai Lama just created this version for me to learn. Just think that in that moment, or whatever you want to think that makes you believe. I mean, don't just ignore the thought. Just don't let the thought in. It's just fake because you're doing an experiment. You're a scientist now, so you focus on this and see whether it affects you. In my case, it worked because understanding it's in the end what is fake, what is not fake. It's just what I'm thinking. It's just my thoughts. I'm used to having the thought, oh, that jerk, they just really suck. I just want to get back at them. That's how I'm just used to it. It's not like a rule that I have to follow. It's not natural as such. And instead, it's not natural because I perceive them in a way in which they don't exist, as an inherent jerk. Right? Yeah. So this is how this makes total sense. Everything that the Buddha taught us about the true truth, about emptiness, it makes sense in terms of being loving, being compassionate, rejoicing, right? And in that way, just having a happier life. All right. Anyway, I'll get back to certain examples like that as well as we continue for as long as we have time. But now I want to, so I got a little time, conventional existence. Now to add another abstract, which is just confusing because the terminology is used in a way which can be confusing. Okay, it is important to understand that the true truth exists conventionally. The ultimate truth also exists conventionally. Even though it's an ultimate truth, it's not a conventional truth, it exists conventionally or nominally. Since existence and conventional existence are synonymous. All phenomena exist conventionally because they're merely labeled or designated. So, conventionally existent is synonymous with existent. So if you hear ultimate truth, conventional truth, and mainly realized by ultimate valid cognizer, mainly realized by conventional valid cognizers. The opposite of conventional existence is ultimate existence. Since ultimately existent is the object of negation of emptiness, and that's a synonym for inherently existent, there's nothing that ultimately exists. Even the ultimate truth does not ultimately exist, although it is an ultimate truth. All right, great. So we've got a little bit more left for today, but I wanted to make sure, homework, please remind me just before we finish, but questions. Do you have any questions so far? Should we take, if you have an important question, anything, to be sure I start this question and answer session before time is up. No? Yes? Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe. I was just wondering, let's say in our reflection or meditation, when we ultimately analyze something, is there a difference in difficulty if we analyze a phenomenon such as table versus analyzing me?
Yeah. Is there a greater difficulty in terms of analyzing the table versus I? I think there is, because the table doesn't have a mind. It really just has a few parts. Doesn't even have many names. It doesn't have like a car, for instance. Has so many parts with different names. So even a car is more complicated than a table. The eye, you have the body, of course, that is very complicated in terms of all its parts. The table can also be very complicated when you think of each atom, but without thinking of these levels. So the body with all its organs, it's very complicated. Plus the mind, like what is the mind? The mind is so difficult to understand that scientists for the longest time didn't even really believe in the existence of mind. They could ignore it without thinking, hey, wait a minute, there must be a mind. It was just the brain. So the mind is difficult to understand. The different parts of the mind are difficult. And then on the basis of that, the merely conventional I, again, is very difficult. Yes. So there are different degrees.
What prompted me to think about this was because it was thought that if we realize the emptiness of one phenomenon, we realize the emptiness of all.
No. No. There is that quote. There is a quote that seems to suggest when you realize the emptiness, but that is always interpreted, that quote. It means once you realize the emptiness of one phenomenon,
it becomes, oops.
Maybe the new battery, yeah.
Yeah, one battery.
Thank you. When we know the emptiness of one phenomenon, it's much easier to know the emptiness of another phenomenon. In other words, it doesn't mean that we need to know that phenomenon. You need to know, of course, the basis. But once you know what is to be negated, when you know something, when you transfer your understanding of lack of inherent existence to something else you're familiar with, then it's not that difficult. Yeah, that's the meaning.
Just one.
Yeah, sure.
One more big question. So, is there a difference in subtlety between emptiness of person and versus emptiness of phenomenon?
No, there is no difference in subtleties because the lack of inherent existence is the same. Yeah. Okay. Yes?
Can I ask a question on the third level of dependent arising? Is there any difference in the way that the third level of dependent arising, in terms of, say, the valid basis of conceptual consciousness for, say, Svatrantika, Madhyamaka versus Prasangika, Madhyamaka? Because on the other side, there is a different of the object of negation for Svatrantika and versus Prasangika, right?
Right,
so,
right. The Svatrantika Madhyamaka, which is the second highest school, they don't really talk about labeling much. They don't talk about the importance of labeling. They would still say phenomena, we label them, we give them names. So a person is defined in all the schools as that which is labeled on the basis of the 4 or 5 aggregates. A being who is labeled on the basis of the 4 or 5 aggregates, right? So it shows that labeling is definitely accepted, but they don't really say you need a basis of labeling, you need to have a valid basis of imputation or basis of designation or labeling. You need a consciousness, but I think they would accept it. It's not a problem. I haven't come across a Svatrantika text that specifically talks about these 3 objects that you need. But since they don't say phenomena exist because they're merely labeled, there's no need for them to specify. But I think they would agree that you need a basis, that you need those 3 factors. In order to correctly label something, you need a valid basis of imputation, you need a conceptual consciousness, and you need a label. I think they would agree with that, yeah. Is there a problem? I mean, do you see a contradiction in anything, that being the case? No?
Does it mean it doesn't apply to Svatrantika?
Like I said, for the Svatrantika, for something to exist, it can only exist, the Svatrantika say, if it appears to a mind. If it didn't appear to a mind, if it didn't appear to a mind that is not a wrong consciousness, right? If it didn't appear to a mind that is not a wrong consciousness, then it couldn't exist. So everything that everything that exists has to appear to a correct mind. If something were to exist without appearing to a correct mind, then it exists truly, they say, and then it's impossible. So their emptiness is the lack of something appearing the lack of something existing without appearing to a correct mind. That is the emptiness in the Svatrantika school. So they say, if something existed without appearing to a mind, then that would be the object of negation of emptiness. If something like these, think of a phenomenon, or no, let's put it in different ways. something existing without appearing to a correct mind. That is the object of negation of emptiness in the Svatantrika school. In other words, therefore, in order for something to exist, I'm not teaching the Svatantrika often enough, so I have a hard time with the vocabulary. We have been doing Prasangika for so long. So in order for something to exist, therefore, it has to appear to a correct mind. But it doesn't have to be labeled. It can be labeled, right? It can be labeled. But they say that phenomena are findable, even despite being labeled, if you label something, for instance, you label the person, the imputed person, as they call the person. So the imputed person, me, with a mind and a body. And if I look for a person that exists beyond me labeling person on the basis of my 5 aggregates, I'll find something. I'll find something beyond being labeled. It's labeled, yes, but that's not why it exists. Whether I label or I don't label, there's really something findable. But it has to, so whether I label or not, it doesn't matter. That's not the criteria for its existence, but rather that it appears to the mind. Okay, so therefore, and on top of that, they also say, when you look for Kelsang Wangmo, so my name is Kelsang Wangmo. So Kelsang Wangmo, the imputed person, yes, I'm imputed on the basis of my mind and body. But there's also a substantially existent person. There's a person that can be found. If you look for the essence of Kelsang Wangmo, you find something, my mental consciousness. And that is not labeled, that's not considered to be labeled, that's the substantial I, the substantial Kelsang Wangmo. That's what I find beyond labeling, beyond designation, there is this essence. That's what they say. Does that help a little? Yeah. Okay. Cecilia?
We talked quite a lot in one of the other sessions about the inferential cognition of emptiness,
yes,
and then the direct realization of emptiness.
Right.
So my first question is, inferential cognition of emptiness moving to a stage where it becomes direct realization, does it happen in the same, can it happen in one meditative sitting? That's the first part of the question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My other question is that the actual experience,
mm-hmm,
does it mean that you have this, you're analyzing with your conceptual mind, like the table, it doesn't exist inherently, you analyze the different parts of the table.
yes,
And at some point when you conceptually understand the emptiness of the table,
mm-hmm,
what happens to the mind in the way it perceives? Does the table kind of disappear?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, regarding your first question, so first you have an initial inferential cognizer realizing emptiness for the first time. Well, in this case, you then need to generate calm abiding and special insight as part of one mind, right? So this needs to go in between. And I don't think you can do that in one meditative session.
Okay.
I mean, you may have already calm abiding from a previous meditation, yes, but your first initial realization of emptiness, to then be able to generate a mind that uses calm abiding, that intense focus, while realizing emptiness, focusing on emptiness and subtly analyzing that, I don't think your mind can do it. You lose your calm abiding in that moment. Not totally lose it, but the mind will not be able to keep focused, to stay focused on emptiness to the degree that you need it to stay focused, which is why you need to train that for some time. So calm abiding needs to be brought together with your realization of emptiness. And then you go towards just single-pointedly focusing on emptiness and slightly analyzing and going back and forth. So that needs some time until you can be single-pointedly focused while analyzing. That is the union of calm abiding and special insight. When you have that, then you need to train more in that, train more and more and more and more, until that mind realizes emptiness directly in the form of a union of calm abiding and special insight. So that takes time. I think you would starve to death if you tried to do it.
What I was trying to clarify is, I understand that the earlier part you have to do many sessions before your analysis gets to that peak. It's reached its finite point, right? And the next step is going to be the direct realization is coming. Is in the next moment. So does that can that happen in one session?
The conceptual mind giving rise to a direct absolutely has to happen.
Okay.
I don't think you stop meditating in the evening. It's a conceptual mind, and next morning it's suddenly a direct perceiver. No, it would be one session.
Okay.
So you sit down in the evening, finish with the conceptual mind, the next morning conceptual mind, and in the same session then it terms. I think it's one session. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what actually, because we use this terminology so often, right?
Yeah.
Only emptiness appears, and then the teacher tells us, if you're thinking of nothingness, then that is the wrong meditation on emptiness. Yes. So when emptiness appears, the word appears, so I have the problem grappling with what does it mean to appear.
Well, to also answer your second question from before, you ask, does the table, when you realize the emptiness of the table, does the table appear? Yeah, it can't. Simply because every time we take the table to mind, it's like the table exists inherently. Every time it appears. So when we now realize the lack of inherent existence of the table appears as lacking inherent existence. Were the table to appear, it would appear as inherently existent. So that's a direct contradiction. One mind cannot have the table appear as inherently existent and as lacking inherent existence. It can only be one of the two. Which is why when you realize the emptiness of the table can no longer appear.
Right.
As to your third question, that's the difficulty. Is emptiness just nothingness? But I think what helps us to understand is when you search for the inherent table, the way the table... So first we have to, of course, identify the object of negation. What is it? That's the hardest bit in the very beginning. So the way this I appears to me in different situations, we have to first familiarize with this way in which there seems to be really something there beyond being just labeled. There's something extra there. And once that is clear, we simply look for it. We search for it. The way we went through in this analysis. So where could it be? In the aggregates, beyond the aggregates, as one with the aggregates. I mean, somewhere in relation to the aggregates, because obviously it's not over there somewhere, my eye. And then at some point, there's a non-findability. It's like, I can't even put it into words, because your conceptual mind, when it first understands it, it's not going to go, it's not there. It's not actually express these words, because then it becomes, it's like then conventional truth appear to it in the form of that it's not there. But it's like, you have it's like the sense, not there, like not there, not findable, not findable. And that's emptiness. It's not saying it's never been there, it's not existent. I mean, the conventional, it's not a mind that focuses on the non-existence of the conventional table. That would just be the non-existence in general. No, the object we were looking for was the inherent table, or the inherent existence of the table. That is non-findable. So that non-findability, that non-existence, is the non-existence of inherent existence and not the non-existence of conventional existence. So it's not nothingness. That's the difference. So what we set out to look for in our ultimate analysis and not finding it, that's what takes us there. Does that make sense?
So just to clarify, it sounds then that it's it's almost like mentally, not to use realization in the context of a direct realization, but it's an experience of this realization that it's not there.
Yeah.
You know, I
just
can't
absence.
find it, you know.
All
so
that
it's just this
absence.
experience of it's really not there because I can't find it. And that is the experience of emptiness that appears to the mind. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So the only thing that you know in that moment is the absence of that particular. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So we've got 3 minutes. I hope it's okay if I continue a little bit, just to start this part of conventional, the criterion here. Conventional existence is also understood in dependence on conventional and ultimate valid cognizers, but in a different way than the two truths. Again, we need conventional and ultimate valid cognizers, as we had before. This is on page 36. It's also understood, but it's slightly different. Not that difficult, but it may initially be a little confusing. The scriptures describe 3 criteria of conventional existence. 3 criteria. Whatever exists conventionally must satisfy the 3 criteria, and whatever meets these criteria necessarily exists conventionally. Also, anything that does not satisfy the 3 criteria does not exist at all. These 3, you can always check, does something exist or not. The 3 criteria are: it is known to a conventional consciousness. It is not contradicted by a conventional valid cognizer. It is not contradicted by the correct analysis of suchness, which is just another way of saying it's not contradicted by the ultimate analysis or an ultimate valid cognizer. Okay, so in other words, number 1, it is known to a conventional consciousness, and there's no contradiction when it comes to conventional understanding, and there's no contradiction when it comes to ultimate understanding, or the understanding of emptiness. So this will do tomorrow. Okay, let's start a little bit. The first criterion of conventional existence. The first criterion for a phenomenon to be conventionally existed is that it is known to or conceived by a conventional consciousness. It is known to or conceived by a conventional consciousness. A conventional consciousness, like a conventional valid cognizer, is a mind in the mental continuum of a sentient being that does not arise in dependence on ultimate analysis. So just a conventional mind does not arise in dependence on analyzing how a phenomenon exists. So it can take to mind anything. However, conventional consciousnesses do not necessarily realize their main objects. So when you use the term conventional valid cognizer, implied by that is conventional valid cognizer, well, it doesn't arise in dependence on ultimate analysis, and it realizes its object. Yeah, so just these 2 characteristics. It doesn't arise in dependence on ultimate analysis, and it realizes its object. An unconventional consciousness is just a mind. It doesn't have to necessarily realize its object. So a conventional valid cognizer is a conventional consciousness, but a conventional consciousness doesn't have to be a conventional valid cognizer, which means a conventional consciousness includes conventional minds that realize their objects and conventional minds that don't realize their objects. But in both cases, they don't arise in dependence on ultimate analysis. So, therefore it says here, however, conventional consciousnesses do not necessarily realize their main objects. They don't necessarily know their main objects. For every mind, all minds that do not arise in dependence on ultimate analysis are conventional minds. Okay. Therefore, in the context of the first criterion, the term to know does not literally mean to realize or incontrovertibly know. Sometimes the Tibetans, in the usage of words, they can also, in a particular context, have a particular meaning. So it doesn't mean incontrovertibly know or realize. It just means to think of, that is to conceive or conceptually apprehend something. The first criterion includes not only everything that exists, but also everything that is generally accepted without necessarily corresponding to reality. Because a conventional consciousness can think of any object, even if it does not exist. So the first criterion, it's actually not necessary to mention it because if the last two criteria are fulfilled, something exists conventionally. But the first criterion shows us you can take to mind anything, whether it exists or not. Right? So in a way, you can take it to mind, you conceive of it. The horns of a rabbit, that's the classic example, doesn't exist. Well, I need to be more specific. The example is that when you see a rabbit from afar, it's got these long ears, and one of the ears is kind of bent over, or both ears, like a bunny, and they look like horns. So someone perceives the ears to be horns. The ears are not horns, they're ears. So therefore, the horns of a rabbit here means most specifically, based on the ears, you perceive them to be horns. It's just a misperception. So horns of a rabbit, you take them to mind, think about how pretty the horns are, and whatever you think about, but of course they don't exist. And there are lots of other examples of non-existences. I mean, believing the earth to be flat. Or from a Buddhist point of view, an omnipotent God is not accepted to exist, right? So again, those are seen, you can take them to mind. You can make a whole reality of a flat world, but that doesn't make it true. So the first just shows us anything can be taken to mind. Inherent existence can be taken to mind, that doesn't exist. All right. So that's the first criterion. And it's not arising in dependence on ultimate analysis. Even emptiness can be taken to mind without analyzing it. You learn about emptiness for the first time and you never analyze. You hear about it, okay, it's an important concept, okay, right? So that could also be taken to mind by a conventional consciousness. But you just don't understand it just with this mind because you're not engaging in any analysis. You have no idea. You take the word to mind and you have a rough sense what it could mean. So anyway, everything that exists and everything that doesn't exist definitely fulfills the first criterion. But now, having taken everything that exists and non-existent, now we need to eliminate those things that conventionally exist or that exist and those that don't. And the next two criteria will clarify that. Okay, great. Now, as to your homework, I'm not sure, you're so busy, you probably don't have time to actually do it. But maybe if you just do it on the toilet or whatever, like anywhere, when you have a short moment to yourself, you may want to give it some thought. Especially in particular, what I would like you to think about. So this is not the abstract now of any of these abstract things we reflected on today or we talked about today regarding the relationship of the true truth or even conventional existence. That comes tomorrow. But what I talked about in terms of how our thoughts create our reality and how envy, for instance, how envy doesn't make sense, how certain emotions based on what we've learned don't make any sense, right? So anything you remember today that maybe struck a chord. I mean, we're all different and different things affect us differently. So anything in terms of our emotional responses, negative emotional responses that make us miserable, make the people around us miserable, anything you've heard in that respect, to take it deeper, to reflect on it more and see, is there a way you can apply it to your daily life? Can you actually make that part of your reality? Right? And in that way, reduce some of the harmful emotions. Okay. Even think about situations when they're so difficult in daily life, but just switch your attitude, kind of almost based on the understanding. It's all in my own hand. It's only my own thoughts. So my thoughts determine whether I see it as a challenge or whether I see it as terrible and annoying, right? And again, to see whether you can apply this and possibly actually apply it and do the experiment. And when you feel it works, well, then of course next time you'll be even more willing to bring it to practice it or to train in this. So that's what I would like you to do. So it's a little hazy because I talked about so many different things. but you can't do the whole thing. Just bits and pieces you remember in terms of the emotions that we want to reduce based on the understanding that everything that appears to us is due to the karma we accumulated, and then it's a matter of our personal interpretation of that, right? In terms of labeling, designating, and how that gives us so much freedom to actually change how we interpret and how we therefore interact, right? And some feeling is good, some emotional response if you can, if it gives you a sense of freedom or something, that motivates you further. Like to just realize it's all in my own hand. If I change my thoughts now, my whole reality is different now, right? How liberating is that? The one thing you can change, there's only one thing you can change. Not anyone else, not your body, not your sense consciousness, your mental consciousness. That, even right now, you can change. You can change your body over time. You can change your sense consciousnesses over time, just as long as it takes to change the body. But to change your mental consciousness, you can actually do it right now. And that's what counts for your reality. How much freedom is in that? How much freedom is in that? Unbelievable. Right? Anyway, on that note, let's dedicate. Yes, please?
When you talk about the zero?
Zero! I forgot zero. I wanted to talk about zero. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, I'll do it tomorrow. Can you remind me in the beginning? I want to talk about zero. Very important. I want to talk about zero. Okay, I'll do it tomorrow. Okay, anyway, so let's, of course, not forget whatever positive potential we've accumulated today. Again, through the power of our mental consciousness, let's dedicate it so that it doesn't get wasted, doesn't get destroyed by our anger. Dedicate it towards our own enlightenment by thinking, may this become a powerful cause for us to finally understand the true truth, in particular realize emptiness, so that we're able to eliminate all the obstructions that are not in the nature of our mind, and instead, for the benefit of every single sentient being, actualize our fullest potential in the form of Buddhahood. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayer.
Chanjo Semjo Rinpoche Mate Panam Kegyoshi Yeva Nyampa Vivaya One Kondu